Welcome to The Conscious Entrepreneur, the only podcast 100% dedicated to the well-being of entrepreneurs. It's where founders come to sharpen their edge from the inside out and lead with clarity, connection, and purpose, without buying into hustle culture or burning out. Hit subscribe right now so you never miss an episode. Let's get started. All right, Conscious Entrepreneurs, we have a very special guest today. We're talking to Mike Goldman. Mike is a 3-time book author. He's a well-known speaker, and he's a leadership team coach, helping leaders to grow their people and grow their profit. His new book is called The Strength of Talent, and it's available for pre-order now on his website, thestrengthoftalent.com. And the book is really about growing your people to grow your profit, something that I know everybody who's listening to this show who owns a business is deeply invested in doing just that. So welcome to The Conscious Entrepreneur, Mike.
The number one driver of profit growth is people growth. It's not a new strategy. It's not a new technology or a new process. All that stuff is fine. I work as a leadership team coach. I work with my clients on all those things. But the number one driver of profit growth is people growth. I've been coaching and consulting for over 35 years, and I have seen great strategies with the wrong people, and they fail every single time. But a mediocre strategy with the right people succeeds, because those right people are either going to take that mediocre strategy and somehow make it work, or they're going to learn and grow and make that a better strategy. So that's what underlies all of this. And too often I see leaders that talk a good game and say people are our most important asset, and yet developing their people may be numbers 9 and 10 on their priority list.
When you say developing your team, could you talk a little bit about what that means to you?
Yeah, it's really, it starts with, and there's this, as you said, this 5-step process. And the first step in the process is setting expectations. So when I talk about what it means to me, we can do that by drilling into this expectation step. As a leader, we need to be super clear with our direct reports as to what success looks like. And I take this word, the words productivity and performance are typically used interchangeably by folks. And I actually use the word performance in a different way. To me, productivity is one of the components of performance. The other is culture fit. So when I talk about developing people, it starts with setting expectations around productivity. How are we going to measure success of what you're doing? But the other is, how do we know whether you are living and breathing our culture, living and breathing our core values? Are you making the people around you better or worse? Are you adding to the culture that we want to create, or are you subtracting from that culture? So when it comes to development, it's a combination, depending on what that person needs, is developing people from how can we help them produce more and get more of the results we want? But it's also, how do we get them to behave in a way that is more consistent with the culture we're trying to create?
And so step 1 is setting the expectations around what that looks like in real practice.
Right.
Day to day. Okay. Awesome. And then step 2.
Yeah. So step 2, and maybe I'll take you at a high level through all of the steps. So step 1 is about setting expectations, as we said. Step 2 is assessing performance against those expectations. And when I say assess performance, the picture leaders have in their mind is, he must mean an annual performance review. I believe annual performance reviews are the worst invention ever created in business. And if you're listening and you're saying, Mike, I agree, that's why we do them quarterly, you do a crappy process 4 times a year. So when I talk about assessing performance, it's not about this formal performance review. We give people a rating and then share their raise with them and all that. I think that's a horrible process. For me, when I talk about assessing performance, it is assessing performance against those expectations, culture fit, and productivity. But it's doing that and doing that together with your peers, and it starts with the leadership team, doing that together with your peers on the leadership team, challenging each other. And it's typically done every quarter, but it's challenging each other to not give people a rating necessarily so you could go share it with them, but it's about challenging each other to make sure you are assessing based on the facts and that you're taking the action required, which is actually the third step. Second step is assessment. The third step is taking massive action based on that assessment to coach people, develop people, have the difficult discussions, make the difficult decisions when you can coach up. So you need to coach somebody out of the organization. The fourth step is accountability. And when I say accountability, most people think, oh, we need to hold our team members accountable for improving. Yes, we do, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about leadership accountability, accountability for each leader to assess their team with a level of accuracy, accountability to take the actions they need to take to help people improve their performance, accountability to make the difficult decisions. And then the fifth step is to cascade that process down through the organization.
Thank you for sharing that. So I would love to ask you a little bit more about the broken system that all of us have been, sort of coached as leaders in our companies to follow, which is, of course, the annual performance review or even a quarterly performance review if you're really a stellar team. Your definition is that that's all bunk. And so tell me how your process actually looks different to someone who's in that performance review process.
It's not just the annual or quarterly performance review that's broken. It's really the whole performance management process. And when I say performance management, we think of things like annual and quarterly performance reviews, 360 reviews, performance improvement plans, joint goal setting, key performance indicators, all those things. And some of those are very good things done right. But there's a study, the Mercer Group did a study that found that only 2% of leaders felt that their performance management processes were adding significant value. And if the number one driver of profit growth is people growth, if our performance management isn't working, that's a big problem. So we need something better. And what my system does a little differently is, number one, it sets expectations not only around productivity, but also around culture fit. It holds leaders accountable. And very often when it comes to performance evaluations and PIPs and goal setting and all these things, it is very much kind of a leader and team member or leader and HR game. I'm going to rank my folks on a scale of 1 to 5 and I'm going to send it into HR. And then I'm going to share it with everybody, when we do the annual performance review. And I think the idea of assessing performance and coming up with the right actions and being held accountable is a team sport. One of the processes that I help my clients put in place is something I call the quarterly talent assessment meeting, the QTAM. And in that meeting, as opposed to a leader assessing their direct report on productivity and on culture fit and sending it into HR, they do that with the peers on the team, not with the people they're evaluating, but with their peers on the leadership team, because your 8 may be somebody else's 6.5.
Right.
You might say, oh, this person is a 9 out of 10 in living the culture. And then one of your peers says, wait a minute, I saw them cursing out the customer service team in the hallway again on Tuesday. How is that a 9 out of 10 in living our core values? So that accountability and that challenge, looking at it as a team, is critical. The other thing is having a specific set of guidelines that allow us to be more fact-based. Way back when I started using an earlier form of this model back about 12 years ago, I'd say to people, score this person on a scale of 1 to 10 in productivity. And now score them on a scale of 1 to 10 in culture fit. Based on those scores, we're going to make certain decisions. Now that was better than doing nothing.
Right.
But the problem with saying score people on a scale of 1 to 10, it's like based on what?
Right.
And again,
There's no standard definition.
I'm a hard grader, but Sarah, you're an easier grader, or vice versa. So I have a very specific set of guidelines that say, in order to be a 10 out of 10, this is what must be true in productivity and in culture fit. In order to be a 9 out of 10, this is what must be true. So I've actually created a measure that allows us to benchmark performance, set goals, hold each other accountable. And it's called the talent density indicator, the TDI. And having that measure is something that makes all this real. And it turns it from a, squishy, touchy, feely kind of art that's not real fact based to something that we can look at much more scientifically and do a much better job of holding ourselves and others accountable.
So tell me more about this metric. It sounds like something that would be really useful.
So in my framework, and I call this whole thing the talent density system, and there is a framework within there called the talent density assessment framework, and based on how people score on both productivity and culture fit, they wind up in 4 categories of performance. There are high performing individuals; those are folks that are high in both culture fit and productivity. There are and I'm going to go to the other extreme. There are low culture fit individuals. Those are people that score low in culture fit. They are not living. They are blatantly and repeatedly violating one or more of our core values. There are low producing individuals, people that may be living the culture, but they're not as productive as we want them to be. And then there's medium performing folks who are not quite strong enough to be high performing, but not low enough to be in one of the 2 low performing categories. So there's these 4 categories of performance, which, by the way, is not in place. So you can go tell people, oh, by the way, you're high performing, you're medium performing. You may want to choose a different industry. Like, we don't go back and tell people that. That's, again, for the leaders to use in debating it with each other, coming up with prescribed actions based on performance. And then back to your question, is this measure? It also allows us to measure where the TDI, the talent density indicator, very simply is calculated by the percent of folks who are considered, that are assessed as high performing, minus the percent that are low performing, either low producing or low culture fit. And when you take your high performing percent minus your low performing percent, you get a number that's anywhere between negative 100% if everybody is low performing, positive 100% if everybody is high performing, or if everybody is medium performing, you're at zero. Your high performing percent is 0. Your low performing percent is 0. So as you move people from medium to high, or coach people out that are low, or keep people as high, or move people from low to high, that number is going to improve. So that's why it becomes a wonderful benchmark and a way to set goals. How are we doing as a senior leadership team versus middle management versus everyone else? What's my TDI for the sales team versus the marketing team versus the operations team? What's my TDI? What's each of my leaders' TDIs for their people? I believe one of the key performance indicators that we should use as leaders, whether it's CEO and managing that team, or whether it's the VP of sales and leading that team, one of the KPIs we ought to be using for our leaders is the TDI, and is it trending up or down?
Yeah, it's a great new metric. And I love that we're introducing a new metric that has, sort of a lens on culture and not just, productivity. So that's a fresh idea. I really like that. I have a question for you. One of the things I've always been taught, and I believe is true, those high performing, low culture fit people are actually the most, toxic employees. And those are the ones that, are hard, can be hard to move out of an organization. Is that your position, that somebody who is a high performer but a low culture fit, can you coach that person up? Or is that, maybe one of your first people to move out? Tell me your position there.
Yeah, I love that question. I'm going to start off by changing our language on that. It's not possible in my model to have someone that's high performing and low culture fit, because performance is a combination of productivity and culture fit. And if someone is low in culture fit, they're low culture fit. Now, so I'm gonna, and to some degree it's semantics, but it's important semantics. So I'm gonna shift your question a little bit. Is it possible for someone to be highly productive, meaning it's your number one or number two salesperson, and yet they're not living your core values? So in my model, if someone is high in productivity and low in culture fit, they're not living your core values, they are in one of the low performing categories, and it's one I call low culture fit. Now, let's talk a little bit about low culture fit. Low culture fit, as you allude to, those folks tend to be toxic to your work culture. They make the people around them worse and not better. It could be your number one highly producing salesperson who's bringing in gobs of revenue, but they are just making the people on the marketing team, the service team, the operations team, they're hurting their performance. So in general, I view them as low performers. And the difference between, I mentioned earlier, there are two types of low performance. One is low culture fit. One is low producing. Low producing is if you're low in productivity, but you may be okay in culture fit. Here's the difference between the two, and it gets back to your question. If someone is low producing, if they continue to be low producing, they're hurting the team, and we can't allow that. And I've seen leaders go 6, 12, 18 months, 2 years with someone who's hurting the team and they're still around. Well, when it comes to someone who's living the culture, but they're not as productive as we want them to be, they tend to be coachable at some level. Might they be, are they coachable to get to where you want them to be from a productivity standpoint? Maybe. They may not have the capability. So it's not black and white. They're coachable. You could turn them into high performers. Maybe, maybe not. But at some level, they're coachable. But when we think about folks that are low culture fit, I don't care what their productivity is. If they're low culture fit, are they coachable? And the harsh reality is 9 out of 10 times they are not coachable. And it's not because they're bad people. Someone who's not living your core values, someone who's a low culture fit, it is just, they're not bad people. They're just a bad fit for your organization. Should we try to coach those people? Should we try to coach people that are not living our core values? Of course we should. We hire them. Everyone deserves coaching, but we need to do it with our eyes open. And having our eyes open says 9 out of 10 times, this is not going to work, because trying to coach someone to live our core values, if they're not already living our core values, is like trying to get somebody to become someone they're not.
Yeah. So when you're talking about sort of your medium performers and trying to turn them into all-stars in your program, you talked a little bit about PIPs maybe not being a tool that you lean towards. What would be better?
If I've got someone who's medium performing, in my model, they are medium performing either because they are lower than I'd like them to be on productivity, and or they're a little lower than I'd like them to be on culture fit. They may be occasionally having problems with one of our core values. Well, we need to coach them on that. We need to help them understand, if they don't already, here are the expectations from a behavior standpoint or from a result standpoint. Here are the expectations, and we need to coach them. They may need coaching. They may need mentoring. They may need development. They may need some training. So we need to work with them. And so the number one thing for medium performer is coach them either on productivity, culture fit, or both. Number two option is if we've got someone who is living our culture, but they're lower in productivity than we'd like them to be. That's a prime opportunity to say, hey, are we not effectively leveraging this person's strengths? They're living the culture. They're the right kind of person for us, but they're not closing as many deals for us, or they're not as analytical as we'd like them to be with the details. What are their natural strengths? If we could shift their role to better leverage their strengths, as soon as we make that decision, they go from medium performing to high performing. So that's one way. So we can coach them, we can change their role. And then here's the harsh truth, that the last option for a medium performer is they may need to be coached out of the organization. And that's a tough thing to do, because someone who's performing at a medium level is doing fine. Like, they're good enough, but good enough isn't good enough, right? If we have all people that,
profits.
if good enough, if good enough is good enough for, and all of our people are mediocre, that's a recipe for death of our organization. So there are a couple of different types of roles where good enough isn't good enough. And those two roles, one is, I believe, anyone on your senior leadership team, if they are not performing at a high level or have the strong ability to get there in the next 3 to 6 months, they do not belong on the senior leadership team. Great people don't work for mediocre people too long before they either leave or become mediocre themselves. The other type of role where good enough isn't good enough, mediocre isn't good enough, is for any role within your organization that is what I would call a core differentiating role, or a strategic differentiating role, using Netflix as an example. So what makes Netflix Netflix? It's probably not their accounts payable department. Could Netflix afford to have somebody who's just solid, good enough in their accounts payable department? The answer is probably yes. I don't need to fire someone if they're not going above and beyond. However, if we think about what makes Netflix Netflix, what's a strategic differentiating role, it might be their content development. It might be their UI, specifically whoever is driving their recommendation engine that's helping us binge watch the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. They can't afford mediocre there. So if you can't coach those folks up to be high performing, we need to coach them out of the organization.
I love that. And it's so important to really understand where your unique differentiator is and make sure you're truly excellent in that area. That has to be the first place to protect leadership. You would say leadership, number one, and number two is, core differentiator, core competency. I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, excellent. So tell me a little bit about how you would help someone who recognizes that as a leader themselves, they may not be in a position to implement this type of a system, because what strikes me is you have to have such a clear idea of not just what exactly are our values, but then how do we get really granular to define those on a scale from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. What does that look like in practice? What's the difference between a 5 or a 6? I mean, these are really, thin slices. So tell me where you would tell a leader to start who may be saying, wow, we are really, really far away from this sophisticated system. We're nascent. What should they do first?
So two different scenarios. If you are a senior leader or a CEO, then go to strengthoftalent.com, pre-order my book, go to mike-goldman.com, contact me. If you're a senior leader, you have the ability to kind of own this and say, hey, we're going to go do this. But the second part, which I think is where your question was, is, maybe you're in middle management. Maybe you're not a leader that has the ability to say, we're going to go do this. You're managing other people, but your company maybe doesn't have a set of core values. Your company isn't doing anything like this. Then I would say two things to start. Number one, make sure you go to your leader, whoever you're reporting to, and get super clear on what their expectations are of you. Start with you and say, hey, when it comes to productivity, if productivity are measurable results, what measurable results are you holding me accountable for? And get really specific. And they may give you an answer, or they might give you some form of, well, I haven't thought about that. Well, great. Challenge them to think about it. Super important. When it comes to culture fit, if it's not clear to you what your expectations are around behaviors that impact culture, get clear on those. So if that's not there, go to your leader and ask those questions. Now, the other thing you can do if you have other people reporting to you is, regardless to whether your company has implemented this process, is you implement it for
As
your
a
team.
team.
Yeah, implement it for your team. There's nothing stopping you from setting crystal clear expectations with the members of your team, assessing them based on that, coming up with actions for what you're going to do to challenge and re-recruit and coach and mentor the highest performers so they never leave and they're getting better. What are you doing to move your medium performers up to high performing? What are you doing to determine whether you can coach up or if you need to coach out some of your lowest performers? Go and do this yourself. And hopefully what you do will have the impact. I know it will have the impact, but hopefully it will impact others around you and your leader, because this is all going to work better if the company has implemented this process. But if the company hasn't, there's nothing stopping from you starting from where you are.
I love that. That's great advice. Well, I think that there are many, many people who can benefit from buying this book. It sounds like, tell me a little bit about what people will find. Are there tools within this book that will help us start if we really are at ground zero?
All the tools are there. Yeah. This is not a book of 100% inspiration. Now, of course, there's a little bit of inspiration there, right? If I don't start the book off with why this is all important, you're not going to keep reading it. So there's some inspiration there, but I am very much okay, Mike, or if I'm reading something, I'm very much a fan of, okay, I understand it. What do I need to go do now? So I am very big on what do you need to go do? And with each step, with each major part of the book, there are tools right within the book, tools you can download from strengthoftalent.com. In fact, if you pre-order the book, it comes with a whole bunch of bonuses that gives you all those tools.
I love that. How long would it take somebody, like I can just say for, small businesses that may have an aspiration to be more sophisticated in their people management and certainly to grow their profits, who say, hey, I don't even have job descriptions for every job. I've got, some 5 words that are my values, but, probably if I went and asked Susie, she can list them. You're kind of at a very basic level. So how long do you think it would really take a company to go from where they are today, as I've described it, to actually being able to kind of make moves and implement this? Is this a 3-month? Is this a 1 quarter type of a project, or is this something longer?
Yeah, I think the good news is you could make moves right away from wherever you are. And the book, doesn't make any assumptions that you've got all this in place. The process doesn't make the assumption. So in the book, if you already have a set of core values, it'll tell you what you do next. If you don't, it'll tell you how to create those core values or how to just figure things out even though you don't have core values. Is there another simpler way to look at it? And there is. Yeah, so the good news is you can start from wherever you are. And we need to be careful about how quick we move on this and how quickly we cascade. So on the one hand, you could start from wherever you are, and that's good. On the other hand, that doesn't mean start it. Do your first quarterly talent assessment meeting with your leadership team. That went okay and you really like the process. Now roll it out to everybody else in the organization. Do not do that. This is something that you need to take a step-by-step approach to get it right at the top. As I said earlier, get it right at the top before you cascade it to the bottom, because while you could start from wherever you are, there's some change management involved here. And I talk about a lot about that in the book, is that there are people leaders whose first reaction will be to protect themselves and protect their people. Why in hell would I score somebody as low culture fit if now I'm going to be challenged to maybe fire them? If now I'm going to be challenged to take action? I'm busy enough. I don't need others challenging me to take more action. So I'm going to fudge my scores a little bit, and I'm not going to have people be low performing. Depending on the maturity of your leaders, that will happen. And if that happens to the degree that may happen, if you roll this out too quickly, you could actually cause more damage than good. You could have people finding out about this process and saying things like, hey, have you heard what our leaders are doing? Every quarter, they're getting together in a room to figure out which one of us needs to be fired. Like, oh my God, if that's the way. Now, the story could also be, hey, isn't it unbelievable that we work for the kind of company where our leaders are meeting every quarter to talk about us and how they can help coach us and how they can help develop us and how we create a better environment. Man, how many organizations are doing that? How lucky are we? And that's what's happening. But if we're not careful and we move too quickly, we could wind up with that very negative, inaccurate story, and that can create a lot more harm than good.
So we definitely need to start at the top. We need to go through some cycles of this process and grow our leadership team, kind of socialize this idea out through, because these things get out. These things get out. So it's really important how everyone's talking about it, how everyone feels about this process, and sort of socializing it through the organization in a very intentional, slow way to make sure that the leaders are really on board and really understand the psychology of what we're trying to accomplish here, and then slowly roll it out team by team in the organization.
Absolutely. And that is kind of the final big part of the book, and the last chapter and step around cascading it through the organization dives in deep to help leaders do that in the right way.
Excellent. Well, Mike, thank you so much for sharing some of these new ideas. I love new leadership metrics. I love the idea of really making our leadership teams in service to our people, who are our greatest value, and also the way that we grow our profit. So this has been an excellent conversation. I know that people will be interested again. So it is thestrengthoftalent.com.
Not take the out. It's Strength of Talent. The book is The Strength of Talent, but for the website, I wanted to make it shorter. So the website is strengthoftalent.com.
Love it. Okay. Thank you. So people can go to that website. They can pre-order the book and get some special bonuses. If you do that, the book comes out in October.
Yeah, October 14th.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much again for sharing these great new ideas.
Sarah, thank you. It's been great.
Thanks for watching The Conscious Entrepreneur. If something landed for you, will you leave a comment? I'd love to hear what you thought. And if you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Thanks so much, and I'll meet you here next week.